Hey Advanced Algebra 2B, here are your 11.3b notes for normal distributions. So for the first example, if Mrs. Lani graded some quizzes and found the mean score of these quizzes to be an 82% and the standard deviation to be 15.1, the question we're going to answer is what is the probability that a score is below 70%? And we're going to assume that these scores were distributed normally, so it's a normal distribution. So for this, first I need to identify my x-bar, or my mean, and I also need to identify my sigma, or my standard deviation. So I go back to the problem, and the mean score is an 82, and my standard deviation is 15.1. Okay, and then we're going to need to find the z-score. So I'm going to say z equals, and I'm going to use the formula out of the notes from the other night, so x minus x bar over sigma. Now when I find z, let's see, well I know that x bar is my mean, so I'm going to put an 82 there. And I know my sigma is 15.1. But the x, what is this x? Well, if you set up the problem this way and you fill in x bar and sigma first, it makes it easier to figure out what x is. So x is always going to be the last number that we haven't used yet. So in this problem, it's going to be 70 for us. Okay. And now I need to do this work on my calculator. I mean, I guess I could do it in my head, but I prefer my calculator. So there's two ways you can type this into your calculator. You can say 70 minus 82, hit enter, and then divide it by 15.1, and you get your z-score. Or if you want to type it in all as one, you have to tell the calculator that you want 70 minus 82 to be on the top of the fraction. You do this by putting parentheses around it, and then divide by 15.1. You should get the answer the same either way. Okay. So my z-score, I need to round to the hundredths place. The hundredths place is the second place. So I'm only going to use two of these decimals, which means I need to round either up or down. To do this, you have to look at that third decimal. So I'm going to cover up everything except for that third decimal. Okay. And now if it's a 4 or lower, I just leave the number the way it is. And if it's a 5 or higher, I round up. So since it's a 4, this is going to stay a 9. It's not going to get rounded up. It's going to stay what it is. So my z-score is negative 0.79. Now when you guys eventually take a quiz on this, I will ask you sometimes just to find the z-score, because I'm checking to see if you know the vocabulary word, and sometimes I'll ask you to find the probability. So make sure that you know the difference between the final answer when I say what is the probability that a score is below 70%, and if I ask you what is the z-score. This thing right here that you just found is called the z-score. Now the z-score is something that we use with the standard normal table. So now I'm going to take this guy, and you saw this in the notes last night, I'll do it again. I'm going to look at my standard normal table, and since it's a negative 0.79, I need to be on the negative side of the z-table. And since it's negative 0.7, well, you're going to have to see this whole table, even though the numbers are going to be little. Let's see, negative 0.7 is right here. And then 0.9, so negative 0.7, here's the 9. So I'm going to trace the 7 all the way over, and the 9 all the way down. And here's the number on the standard normal table that I'm going to use for my probability. Now, this number for the probability, I know it says on the table 0.2148, but this is a decimal that we need to change to a percent. So this is really, if I move the decimal place over to 21.48%. Okay. So the final answer for this problem, I'm going to restate the question. What is the probability that the score is below 70%? The probability that a score is below 70% is 21.48%. Or in other words, there's a 21.48% chance that one of my students got below a C. Okay. Now, if you don't like writing out all that longhand, there is a shorter way to write it. You can use some notation. P in math stands for probability. And when you say of, most of the time it means that there's going to be some parentheses. So this is probability of x being less than 70. I guess I could say less than or equal to. So the probability that x is less than or equal to 70 is 21.48%. So if this is just the shorter way of writing this same sentence. This is the mathematical symbolic way, and this is writing it out in English. Now, I want you guys to practice a problem on your own. So for this practice problem, you're using the same mean and standard deviation that we used above. You're using the 82% for your mean and the 15.1 for your standard deviation. And I want you guys to find the probability that a score is below 90%. And I either want you to write out your final answer as a sentence or to write it out symbolically. Either way, I'm going to check off this practice problem tomorrow, so make sure that you do this in addition to writing down the notes. All right, guys, have a good night, and I will see you tomorrow. Thanks.